And we've also learned in terms of intergovernmental relations that if we put our resources together, in this instance being water affairs, we can really make it. But also, we've had in the past meetings where we had to travel from one place to the other. So the lockdown has actually given us an opportunity to test whether we can continue with the visual meetings that we are currently having. I don't even want to tell you how many meetings I've had in the past 3 weeks. But there has not been movement to what we used to call central locations like before. So this is something that I think we need to work on and continue and with the momentum even post the lockdown. And then one other issue that I think is our experience also is the issue of the homeless people that have been housed in our places of safety. What do we do post-lockdown? Because we've taken the homeless people to the street because we are fighting COVID-19. Is this going to tap into our already existing housing programs that we have in the country, or what do we do? I'm raising this as a point that we can all discuss. I do not have answers for it, but I'm just thinking that I don't foresee a situation where we can say we're now releasing people back to the street, but we need to have a social approach on how do we deal with this matter going forward. And hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. Okay, thank you. And the most interesting point coming to the issue of decision making, one of our local municipalities here in the district has an acting municipal manager and acting chief financial officer. Their acting contract came to an end last week on Thursday. Now, if you look at the regulations says no council meetings, but we all know that it's only council as well as, it's only council that can appoint an acting municipal manager or an acting CFO. Now we are left with these legal challenges that may come at a later stage. Yes, in this instance, we can say that the executive mayor can make that calling, but to which extent are we going to sustain some of these things that has got legal implications post the lockdown? Are we not going to see many challenges coming our way? That's something that we'll also need to look at. I also think that generally we are on what we call a perpetual emergency procurement mode, based on all the PPE and the sanitizing material that we have to use in trying to combat the spread of the COVID-19. So there is no normal following of the procurement process. That has been our experience in the past 3 weeks. And then we also struggle to get the PPE because I think all of us are competing for services. We are in the Northern Cape, far from the major economic hubs. So we have actually been struggling to get PPEs. Yes, indeed, ultimately we did receive them, but our experience is that there was a period that we really had to wait as a province or as the district to get PPE and all the material that is required if we were to actually confront the COVID, the spread of the COVID-19. You'll pardon me, I'm trying to isolate everything and not take what Lance has already talked about. The issue of the budgets of the 2 financial years. For us, our experience is that it will be very interesting to know. Normally, at the end of the financial year, we've got what we call savings. And the period that we are in suggests that we are not going to complete what we have been doing. We'll have to shift now and concentrate in the main on making sure that we put all our efforts that will make sure that we... Hello? Hello?
You can continue. Is there some interference?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. If you can hear me. So I think that's something that we will also grapple with at what we called the end of the financial year. Our interest is at what is going to happen beyond the 30th of June 2020. We are looking with interest as to what will happen beyond that time. But we do appreciate that the country is now on lockdown, and we are all putting our efforts in making sure that we keep all our people safe in their communities, and that we all fight the COVID-19 pandemic. One other issue that was a major problem for us and our ward councillors in our local municipality is the issue of the distribution of the food parcels. Food parcels is the program of the Department of Social Development and not necessarily our municipalities, but the distribution affects or requires that our ward committees must be central. We've actually realized that the qualifying criteria for beneficiaries is not the same for local government as is for social development. They've got their own criteria. We use our normal indigent policies as to who would qualify. And we've realized in the process of doing this that there are actually disparities on how this one government has got a different qualifying criteria for the issue of the food parcels. We're trying to tighten this. There was the first phase, we are going to the second phase, and we are trying to find each other on the second phase, but that was a very challenging experience. And I think we will all learn from this beyond the post-lockdown period. I think, yeah, and then in a nutshell, I think I do concur with what Lance has said. I'm trying not to repeat everything that we said, but if there are any questions from the participants, I think we are, I will respond as such. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms Bogatsu. I think that that was actually very, very useful just to hear from the coalface some of the challenges and also some of the solutions that you have come up with. And what I'm starting to hear more and more is questions about what happens after the crisis, what happens after the lockdown ends, what happens after the state of disaster is lifted. A lot of concerns around what all of this is going to mean going forward for the upcoming budget, for the revenue, but also for in terms of the expectations that this places on local government. So I think some very, very interesting things coming through. I saw somebody who had a hand up. Hanali, you had your hand up for a while. Please go ahead.
I want to comment. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I just want to comment, and thank you for my colleague from Kimberley. I just want to share what many municipalities are doing on virtual public participation. We went to our council on the 26th of March before the lockdown, and we amended our public participation policy to include virtual public participation in the lockdown period. And we changed our schedule of key deadline required by legislation. And so we made the PowerPoint presentation that we would normally make in town halls in different towns. We sent that on all platforms and on Facebook and on all social media to people, and we extended the 21 days to 30 days to give them more time to reply, and we will be getting all the public participation before the end of April. And we will use that to put it in front of our council, both on our IDP and our 3-year budget. And many of the municipalities in the Western Cape did it that way, so that we do public participation before we consider the final documents. I just want to share that.
Thanks very much. That's very useful. Can I just quickly, in response, maybe, Hanali, somebody raised the issue of access to data. Anything that municipalities can do to enhance people's access to data? Because the common narrative is always that the people that you want to hear from the most are perhaps the people with the least access to data. Any suggestions in that regard?
Yeah, I was thinking we should contact SALGA and Vodacom and MTN and ask them to make data available for free during this period, especially for this. The school children and the learners in Bergrivier also ask for data on a constant basis to do their schoolwork with. So that is a bigger issue that we need to escalate to our provincial JOC and to the national JOC to see how we can get big government involved. All municipalities has got free access via our libraries, but they are closed at the moment. So maybe if we stagger the unlocking, it will help if that is part of the first places to be unlocked so that the people can still access that.
Yeah.
Yep, you need to unmute. Yep.
Hi, Dean. Sorry, my mistake. Dean, I saw your hand. Please go for it.
Thank you, Jaap. Morning, colleagues. Just in terms of the communication as well, I know a lot of municipalities are making use of service providers to provide the internet services to them. What we have done in Cape Agulhas as well is to actually have Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi at certain points in the municipality, and we actually deliberately started with the communities that doesn't necessarily have access to data. So we would have it at ECDs and you know at some of the schools and our community halls where we would have where we have access to free Wi-Fi or free data. So that's something that people, and we did it specifically with keeping in mind that we would want to extend, you know, and find more specific ways for people to communicate with us. And if we go the digital route, we need to be able to make sure that people can actually access free data for the purposes of communicating with the municipality. So that's something that one can look at as well. I think the other question that you asked is the disaster management platforms and the structures and how they're actually working. My experience here within the Overberg districts is that they are actually working. The local JOCs or the district JOCs meet every day, and so does the provincial JOCs, and the information is fed through to myself or the MMs and the mayors via the district mayor and also from the provincial department. I think it's just important for all of us, and I have mentioned it in the chat as well, is that what's going to happen afterwards. We need to, specifically for the municipalities, we need to make sure that everything that we do now is sustainable, but also what extra you know, support can we give to the most vulnerable people that still require services and from the municipality after the lockdown as we wish. And as I've mentioned in the chat, is that, you know, we will definitely have a lot more pressure on our revenue budget and our ability to actually you know, collect and you know, keeping to the collection rates that we have had before the lockdown. So those are some of the things, and I think what we need to do is to have sort of a common approach so that people, where it actually works, you know, we need to share that, but we need to have a common approach on how we would address this going forward, so that we don't have an issue of some municipality doing it this way, others doing it the other way. And I think that's where most probably SALGA and most probably national and provincial treasuries need to provide some assistance and guidance as well. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dean. And an interesting response to your comment coming from Lance in the chat box. So I think these exchanges are very, very useful and can help us take the matter forward. Thanks so much. Any other points that people want to make? Because I think this is time when we can open the floor for comments further, inputs, experiences, challenges that you want to bring to the attention of the group, please raise your hand or otherwise signal to any of us that you want the floor. I was just reminded when yes, I hear someone coming through. Who's that?
Graham.
Graham, go for it, Graham.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to follow on up some of the comments that the colleagues have made, I think I've raised it about 3 weeks ago. I think each province would actually have what I call an integrated COVID-19 response plan. This particular province is still busy with putting something like that together, fundamentally based on the modeling that's been presented by the Department of Health. So it actually implies that each department or each cluster go and look at the modeling and how the infection rates actually increase, whether that's and the mortalities in that, and then based on that, you actually provide a integrated response plan for the province. But it also then focuses on the other elements like the humanitarian relief and other stuff and so on. So I think that is work to be done. And I know in terms of the legislation, municipalities were asked to put each response plan together, then have an integrated district response plan together with that, and then just sort of feed into what we call then a integrated provincial response plan. I think that is crucial. I think focusing on the response of COVID-19, a concern is being raised about a post-COVID-19 socioeconomic recovery plan. And so what we will do at the later stage this week, our Department of Economic Development together with Treasury will engage municipalities around a post-COVID-19 socioeconomic recovery plan. And the Minister of Finance in the province, David Maynard, he must actually lead on that work that needs to be done and so on. I think the biggest challenge that we have now, it's the fallout around the humanitarian relief in the province. My personal view is that municipalities are most probably best placed to deal with the humanitarian relief, but premise on some support from national and provincial in this regard. It is senseless for us to make food parcels from the province. I think municipalities know best who their vulnerable communities are, and it cannot be only the indigents. I think it's fine to make a reference to the indigents, but I think that's a moving target, and additional people become then vulnerable as the weeks actually progress into the lockdown and so on. So while it's a good premise to start the indigents, I think it's the information is actually on a daily basis becomes outdated. And for this reason, I think municipalities are best placed to understand who their vulnerable communities are. And then based in terms of humanitarian relief, how does the national and provincial government support municipalities to drive that humanitarian relief? I mean, many municipalities in the province have actually gone ahead, farmers and key stakeholders and companies, to begin their own humanitarian relief initiatives in relation to the vulnerable communities, and that is commended from municipalities. We still wish to work on how do we support, and we will take that into cabinet tomorrow and elaborate how is it possible that we can actually assist municipalities in this regard. I think the structure that the national minister has presented in terms of the national to the provincial what is this, command council and the provincial command center, we will take that format tomorrow to cabinet, just for cabinet to endorse it. But I think it's also work that the districts and the locals have done, and it's fundamentally what we call the district model, the joint district approach. And Cabinet has about 2 or 3 weeks ago endorsed that response to COVID-19 within the province. the structures in the Western Cape are functional, and we're working on it. But obviously, we've also submitted a application in terms of the disaster relief grant. Municipalities have submitted that. We've consolidated that, and that has been presented up north. Over the weekend, we had positive feedback that they're under consideration, and it might be that we will get the entire allocation for the relief. I mean, that only relates to infrastructure. That's water, sanitation, shelters, and public spaces. I think further discussions around humanitarian relief must still take place. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Graham. That was Graham Paulson from the Department of Local Government, HOD of the department. So thanks very much for those very useful insights. Any other points that people want to raise? The issue of food security has come up quite a bit in this meeting, and of course in the overall management of this crisis has become a major concern. I think Ms Bogatsu raised the issue of municipalities being put in a position to have to issue these sort of emergency permits to food traders, and the challenges that presents, because they still also have to comply, at least in the long run, with the Foodstuffs Act. But it comes from a realization that we need to open the food system, and we cannot just rely on the supermarkets. But what has this meant for municipalities? It'd be great to hear some views on that. Anyone who wants to come in? I see Daniel Plaatjes has got his hand up. Daniel, please, over to you.
Thanks, Job, and good morning to all of you. I just wanted to say that it seems to me, from where I'm sitting, that the whole macroeconomic fiscal framework is going to change. But also that it's got a knock-on effect on the division of revenue, i.e. the fiscal space that municipalities and provinces have. And linked to that is obviously the potential changes on conditional grants, other forms of emergency transfers and that. Clearly the shock, there's been a shock to individuals, households and communities, and in particular those small business industries, where disposable income is no longer available. There are three matters of concern that I have, which has got to do with, we need to think, this forum in particular, SALGA and others need to think as to what the institution which I'm heading is, how do we deal with the fact that municipal revenues has gone down because there's been a suspension of suspensions in water and electricity supplies to households and communities, and as a result that the revenue base has been partially depleted. And the potential that communities will be forced by municipalities to pay back, because there was no cut of electricity and water in this period. And obviously municipalities are going to chase their resources from those who couldn't pay, but there's been a shock to those households and those cash is not available. There's the potential, what I refer to, potential for a threat to residential peace, if you like, community peace, in this relationship to municipalities. And that is not only a matter of the poor, it's also a matter of the middle class, or lower middle class, where now there's a shock to those households and people don't have the money to pay. That's the first set of issues. The second is, I think the experience that I've picked up in terms of reading what's going on in the Western Cape, people are being moved to different places, and there is not adequate consideration of safety and security. One have heard that through a number of platforms of violation of human rights, on the one hand, violation of criminality in terms of women, where in particular and I'm saying one have heard, in particular in one of the camps, if you can call it that, a 16-year-old female being gang raped. So there's an issue, and it's probably one of those things where you're going to get a rising increase in criminality and violation of people's rights. And the question is, how's municipalities responding to that threat, to a deepening of vulnerability to a particular category, if you like, of vulnerable people, homeless, but also not able to protect themselves. So it would be good to hear as to how do we deal with that? Because some of the solutions that we thinking about is and I'm quite wary of it's a new environment responding to, but some of those solutions are not necessarily always intact with what is the resource base, what are the capabilities in those communities who find themselves in a situation where vulnerability is a big issue. The response that's been given with regard to food parcels and the struggle of municipalities, and the fact that municipalities have to respond to matters especially many of the local municipalities don't have the cash base, don't have some of them don't even have a cash that will carry them over 20 days period. And as a result, there are serious concerns around that, which on the one hand requires us to really look at the whole question of governance, community governance, local government governance, and how that actually fits in a period of crisis. And which brings me to the last point, that in many local municipalities we find farms, agricultural communities, farmers, commercial and black emerging farmers in Northern Cape. I heard one of the colleagues talking about the Northern Cape. There's a struggle and that's probably across the country, a struggle to create, to see the role of agriculture and food security as also a potential responsibility that municipalities have towards its own citizens. So a key thing then is how do you then facilitate in this period, but also post this period, a role of municipalities in food security, in agriculture, and by implication in terms of the land reform question, during and post the COVID. And I think these are hard questions that we need to deal with, because the answers are not, there's no right answer. There's only what is relevant and appropriate at the given time because of the nature and extent of the interventions that needs to be made. But we need to think differently on it. It's not only about licensing. It's not only about making sure there's a tax from properties, but in those areas for the municipalities. But it's also to see exactly how does municipalities deal with waste, agricultural waste. How do we rally people around those resources of agricultural processing? What is the role of the municipality? Honorable, integrated councillors with high levels of integrity to help us all out of this. And obviously those that got knock-on implications for the value chain of agriculture and business processing. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Daniel. He's chairperson of the Financial and Fiscal Commission. Thank you very much for those inputs. What just struck me suddenly is that actually there's an interesting history to the Disaster Management Act, because right now local government is being thrust to the forefront of dealing with the crisis. But there's an interesting constitutional point here, because disaster management is actually not a local government competency. The schedules to the Constitution don't list disaster management as a local government competency, yet local government now has to deal with the crisis. Obviously, it has to. When the Disaster Management Act was passed many, many years ago, it was sponsored by the Department of Cooperative Governance, DPLG at the time, and put through Parliament. There's a range of rules in place in the Municipal Systems Act and in the FFC Act that speak about protecting local government against unfunded mandates by making sure that when a bill is passed that puts an additional responsibility on local government, there's a whole process that's followed to ensure that proper homework is done to see whether this new mandate for local government is properly funded, yes or no. Interestingly, when the disaster management bill was passed, none of those rules were followed. There was not really a concerted effort made to make sure that municipalities are properly funded to deal with disaster management. And some of that may be coming back to haunt us right now. One of the speakers was saying, well, some of these disaster management structures that are envisaged in the Disaster Management Act were actually dormant because we had to revive them to deal with this crisis. So the issue of mandates it seems to be quite an important one emerging from this discussion in the short term, but also in the long term. What about food security? What about the homeless? These are additional mandates placed on local government for very good reason, because local government is best placed to deal with these issues, as Mr. Paulse indicated. But yeah, there is a sense of mandate creep that sets in, which could be seen as sort of a finicky constitutional point, but in the long run it affects the sustainability of local government and its ability to be useful in situations like this when the demands are so extremely high. So I think that's an interesting point that emerges from the conversation. I'm looking around the gallery of names to see if there's anyone else who wants to make an input or wants to respond to some of the issues raised on the chat box. Could I maybe just go back to Lance and Ms Bogatsu? Anything that you want to bring in response to what you've heard from the people in the meeting? Lance, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here. I'm hoping that I'm audible. I think comments that are being made on both the chat group as well as those that have been made by some of the speakers are very useful. There are 2 points I wanted to make. The first one is linked to an earlier point I had made, is that just because we are under lockdown does not mean our common sense must also be in lockdown, or our understanding of proper governance processes must go under lockdown. I want to give an example. So yesterday I get a call from one of the provinces, and the MEC there has decided there's a municipality that made the request to convene a virtual meeting. And the MEC says, no, the regulations say you can't meet. Now, there's no question asked about what is it that you want to meet about, because that would have answered the question whether the meeting should virtually proceed or not. And there are two things. The first thing is that this week, there's an acting MM in that municipality. This week, that MM's acting comes to an end. So what is going to happen tomorrow when that acting comes to an end? So the municipality is thinking ahead and proactively, let's try and either extend or get another person to act. Secondly, what would have assisted ordinarily is, if you look at the regulations the way they stand now, it authorizes for emergency decisions a mayor or a municipal manager. So one would have expected maybe the mayor could, as an interim measure, appoint an interim municipal manager. But the problem in that municipality is that the mayor has been suspended by his party. and it's formally been communicated. So tomorrow you will have no executive leadership in that municipality, no municipal manager, no mayor. And yet an MEC just says, no, the regulations say you can't meet. So I think for me the difficulty is us wanting to suspend common sense and proper governance processes in, yes, understandably a difficult time, but a virtual meeting does not go against social distancing. It does not go against limitation of a number of people in the room. In fact, all it does is to show proper governance so that there's no vacuum in that municipality come tomorrow. So one would hope that we would see more of this going forward, and that we're not going to forget about our responsibilities. The second one is the issue of funding, and the Prof touched on this issue. I think this is going to be with us for a very long time. The impact of COVID-19, and particularly the financial burden that has been placed on municipalities, are going to be with us for a very long time. And on another platform that I participated in last week, someone made a very interesting comment, which I thought about. I'm going to share it. You will think about it yourself. And the person said, this is the time that requires municipalities to act like that person. And I think all of us know such a person. There is a person that does not buy cigarettes, but is a smoker. There is a person that does not buy alcohol, but they are drinkers. But they do find a way when they are on their own to buy cigarettes for themselves or to drink when they are by themselves. So it says municipalities should try and look at everyone else first for that alcohol and that cigarettes and benefit from that. And when they are on their own, they should look at their own resources. Let's think about that.
Right.
Can I chip in?
Yes, please do so.
I appreciate various comments that have been made from my colleagues. I think they are actually taking us forward. But the only issue that I need to raise regarding the issue of visual meetings, especially on public participation, is for us to ensure that we maximize our communication strategies, because we do not want to be accused tomorrow that we did not actually cover a majority of our local communities. So that is the only thing that I think I want to raise in that regard. But the interesting part that I also want to raise is that on the financial aspect of municipalities, we already have got municipalities that are categorized as municipalities in distress. We've got a lot of those in the Northern Cape in terms of the Back to Basic program. So those are the municipalities that I'm actually extraordinarily worried about post-lockdown. So if municipalities that I think are doing well are struggling now, you can imagine how those municipalities are faring currently. So I think national government really needs to do a lot to make sure that there's some form of funding to buffer those municipalities that are in distress in this regard. So those are my only parting points. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Now, I'm getting a bit concerned that lawyers are going to have a field day after the crisis. Also lawyers in local government. And I worry that listening to some of the comments that have coming through, and also the anecdote that Lance shared with us, that common sense is thrown out of the window, and we may see quite a bit of these issues being brought before the courts after the lockdown ends. So I think the call to use common sense is a very good one. But I think the point about funding and how this crisis lands in a sector, in a system of local government that by all accounts is not doing as well as it should, to put it mildly, that we have many dysfunctional municipalities, and how are they coping? How will they deal with the crisis and the fallout that comes as a result of this? Any final points to be made before we head towards the end of the meeting? I see Daniel got his hand up. Go for it, Daniel.
Yeah, I saw Professor Ivor Sorokinski's, I don't know whether he's on this thing still, but I saw he raised a point about essential workers and whether councillors, I mean, the basic point that he's making, I think there are certain decisions and processes that need to be followed within a council, and he's asking whether councillors are also considered essential workers. And I think it's an important question because it hits at the whole issue of leadership and governance in these difficult times. I can't answer it, but what I can say is that all parliamentarians that I work directly with are considered essential workers in this environment. So that's the same hold for councillors, and maybe you and Nico and Medler, the people who understand municipal law municipal structures law can actually answer this question, because it's quite important that we know this. Because we've been liaising with, and for a couple of nights till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning with municipal managers and some mayors to resolve some of the interventions that needs to be made as part of the COVID response and the crisis that they're experiencing on their budgets. And I think what you alluded to is correct, because there are huge unfunded mandates that municipalities are given in this crisis and need to respond to. Hence, I raised my point that the macroeconomic fiscal framework needs to change, which consequently means that the division of revenue needs to change, which gives conditional grants and equitable share allocation. I'm of the view that the Minister of Finance is going to have to go back to Parliament and table a new budget, table a new macroeconomic framework, table a new budget, table a new division of revenue and appropriations. So, and Parliament in any case is starting to do, as for instance, the Portfolio Committee on Health has already held a virtual meeting. We're supposed to speak to the select committee of the NCOP on the vision of revenue and the appropriation on the 22nd. So there are processes in place to get governance going, even if it's difficult to do it. So I think that the question it asks is it's probably also hits at the point that Lance has made about internal management processes and the governance of that. So I don't know whether you the lawyers in this group are able to give some clarity to that question. Sorry, Ivor, I thought that somebody will respond to your point.
Thanks. I've also been thinking of this category of essential workers, and we'll look into it and we'll feed back into the meeting afterwards, or the group that was here to get a sense, because the point of essential workers is linked to the definition of the Labour Relations Act, and I haven't checked it yet, but maybe there's someone who knows more. I see, Anton, you've got your hand up. Go for it.
Sorry, I just had some difficulty to unmute. Yeah, good morning. The whole issue of essential workers by definition, as you've just pointed out now, is a difficult one because it's a labour law issue. But councillors have been granted permission to go out and assist. And on that basis, municipal managers have issued permits to councillors to go out and assist. Now, if I move away slightly from the definition of essential workers, but I look at the actual work that is being done on the ground by councillors as opposed to members of parliament, And I say that with great respect because there are certain members of parliament who are working very, very actively with councillors in municipalities. And the work that they do is extremely valuable, and it's more a coordinating role than anything else. But what I saw councillors doing is coordinating the issue of donations, arranging with supermarkets to pick up food and to distribute the food to some of the organizations who actually distribute them to the needy households. And in that respect, I think councillors are doing an exceptional job in mainly assisting people that are needy. The other thing that is also happening is that most of the municipalities, and I can't speak for other provinces, but I know in the Western Cape, councillors contribute to a fund. And this money that's been contributed to the fund over many months before the lockdown is now being used to actually buy food and to assist people who are really in dire need. A very important role. So I wouldn't go as far as to say that councillors could be defined as essential services, but the role that they are playing at the moment is very essential. I just wanted to make that point, and then also all the other speakers and the information that came out in this meeting this morning, I think was very, very valuable. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much, Anton. Much appreciated, and it's very important points being raised there. I'm looking around the gallery of names to see if there's any final points. We've reached the end of our time together. I see Karen has got a hand up. Go for it, Karen.
Yes, sorry. Can you hear me?
Hi. Sorry, I just thought to come back briefly. I thought we've got a few minutes to the question of food security initiatives and food parcels. I think Hans also put a question in the chat on the side in terms of how to best distribute it, I think both logistically and politically without politicizing the issue. I saw over the weekend also that some comments came up on social media from some opposition parties in terms of asking where the governing party is involved, and it could be in municipalities and in provinces. How can one secure that these distribution drives, which are becoming ever more important, I think, as the danger of hunger goes up, that they are seen as non-party politically aligned, and that the opposition parties are part of it? And then also logistically, what are the good ways of doing it, if there's any more experience of the distribution specifically?
Great, thanks. Important question there, because food parcels can, and obviously there's a history with food parcels, not just in this country, but also across the world. The politicization of humanitarian aid, unfortunately, is also something that's very real. Any comments on that? I think the HOD, Graham Pulser, was indicating, that municipalities should know best how to distribute food aid. I think there's also a concern that municipalities should not launch into purchasing food parcels or organizing food parcels beyond their capacities or beyond their mandate. But the distribution and the identification of beneficiaries should be something that makes perfect sense for municipalities to be responsible for, to at least play a major part in. He was indicating it should go beyond just using your normal indigent register, because this is a moving target and people become more vulnerable as the crisis continues. So those were a few important pointers. Is there any other experiences on this that we want to bring to the meeting? Well, otherwise we can put it in the chat box and distribute this afterwards, or something that we just continue pondering about, because traditionally municipalities are not seen as primarily responsible for food security. This is a new theme for local government. Suddenly thrust into the agenda. But it seems that it's something that municipalities need to start thinking about. What is its role in food security in this crisis, particularly, but perhaps even going forward, without it becoming another mandate for which local government is inadequately funded. All right, could I maybe ask Khalil, do you want to say something at the end of the meeting just to close us off before I do a bit of a wrap up?
No, thank you. Yeah, just from my side, I think it's a useful conversation. Obviously, many challenges, but I think some of the big challenges is around funding to local government. And I don't think in the short term, and as Lance has said, we must learn from these experiences so that we're better prepared for things in the future. So that is a key issue. There's a number of issues raised in the chat box, and I think we have already responded to some of those issues, like the cell phone network companies and the bargaining council issues around danger allowance, which we are currently already engaged on. So we will get back to municipalities on that. So from my side, just the thanks to Mamiki, Lance, and yourself for your input, but also for all the participants for connecting in. I think it could be a very useful way for the future for where we can organize these webinars at short notice, but also without having to travel long distance to get us to a point, say center point. And maybe we should look at, based on the topics that's relevant, that we have more of these going forward. But thanks to you, Jaap, for hosting it. Very useful.
Great, thank you so much, Khalil. So, yeah, I think all that's left for me is to also just thank everyone. I think this has been a very useful meeting. Clearly, the challenges are immense, and I wish you all the best in the work that you're doing, particularly those of you who are on the front lines of managing the crisis. A lot of problems raised, a lot of challenges raised, long-term funding concerns that are deepening almost daily. Issues around mandates, the governance problems, you know, the intergovernmental relations that don't always work the way they should, also in this crisis. However, what I also saw and what I heard coming through is a lot of solutions, a lot of ideas, a lot of opportunities being explored. I think the chat box is full of suggestions and ideas that we can all benefit from. And Khalil and I just had a communication on the side that we commit to capturing all the comments that were made in the chat box and make that available to you so that it doesn't disappear when everybody logs out, and that we keep you in the loop of what was shared on the chat box. I urge all of you to keep talking and to keep sharing experiences and insights. I want to thank also everyone involved. Mandy Cupido, who is in the background, played a major part in setting all of us up and ensuring the Zoom invite in the RSVPs. Thank you, Mandy, for your effort in making this a smooth meeting. Thanks, Ms Bogatsu. Thank you, Lance. Thank you, Khalil. Thanks to the Hans Seidel Foundation for supporting us. And thanks to all of you for checking in. And hopefully we can do this more often. To all of you, take care of yourself and those around you. And let's stay in touch. Thanks, everyone, and keep well.